How would we distinguish between a printed product and simulation? I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Ironic would it be if the Paralympic athlete actually became stronger thanks to cybernetics? Yeah, I mean, I'm not I'm not a huge proponent of dividing and separating people, but I feel like if cybernetics reach that level and become that ubiquitous, you kind of have to create separate categories. You're going to have cybernetic athletes. You can't have, for fairness purposes, you couldn't have cybernetic athletes competing against entirely organic athletes. What actually happened? That actually happened with the leg sprint. It was better than the leg. Are you talking about? Oh my god, I feel awful. His nickname was Tick Tick. Runner, sprinter. What was his name? Somebody's probably going to beat me to it. He was a Paralympic sprinter, and yeah, I think from the knee down had prosthetics. And the reason I specifically remember him is because I remember that after he was in the Olympics, he was arrested for murder. Oscar Pistorius. Yep, that's him. Yes. South Africans are in shock after their native son and historic sprinter Oscar Pistorius was charged with the murder of his girlfriend. Yep. Yep. I remember watching him race, and that was a while ago. Oscar Pistorius. He was denied parole. Let's see. Oh, so he was convicted. Let's see here. Oh wow, that was 2008. Okay, yeah, that was as long ago as the last time the Phillies won the World Series. So he set Paralympic records. He was in the 2012 games. Let's see. Valentine's Day of 2013, he shot and killed Reva Steenkamp at their home. In 2015, he was arrested. He was convicted. In 2015, he was recommended for early release. He appealed in 2014. He has a second prison term. In 2017, it was confirmed he had filed papers. After an additional hearing, parole was again denied in March of 2023. He will not be eligible for parole again until August of 2024. Yeah. Yep. In popular culture. An unofficial biopic based on public records titled Oscar Pistorius Blade Runner Killer aired in November of 2017 on South African TV. The movie was made without the consent of either the Pistorius or Steenkamp families. The Pistorius family threatened legal action against Lifetime Movies, the American television network that produced the movie. In August of 2018, Amazon Prime released a 4-part documentary series on its video service titled Pistorius. The episodes were titled The Dream, Valentine's Day, A Good Day to Tell You That I Love You, and The Man Who Wasn't There. In September of 2020, ESPN released a 4-part documentary series on ESPN Plus titled The Life and Trials of Oscar Pistorius. I'm going to cut this piece. I'm considering this the break between episode 1 and episode 2 of this installment of Myscellaneum. That one. Close that one. Sim theory is an analogy of software to a hypothetical extreme. Yeah. Well, and I feel like sim theory became way more popular after the Matrix movies, because it took what was essentially a thought experiment and an intellectual exercise and turned it into an action movie, which made it way more popular. I do also have, and I don't want to drive anybody away, but if you click on my profile and you click on the link tree, the second link in there is the Foxhole, is a Discord that I created, and in that is a live studio audience video chat. I have a question on the various punks: solar punk, diesel punk, cyberpunk. Which is your favorite? Cyberpunk is the one that I've been interested in the longest, and that goes back to like Johnny Mnemonic in the mid-90s. But I've been growing more interested in steampunk, mostly since I started playing D&D, because the first character, it wasn't the first character I ever played, it was the first character I played in a public game. It was the first character I played on Twitch, is an artificer. And so the artificer is in a way very much the steampunk character of D&D, because it's the tinkerer, it's the inventor. And so the more I thought about that character and developed that character and the things that that character had and did and wanted to create, the more intrigued I got by steampunk and sort of clockwork punk. And so cyberpunk is my first love, and steampunk is my newer interest. Hardware technology could also be in that same hypothetical extreme, like a print versus a sim model, right? I need to check out your YouTube channel more. I appreciate that. That's actually the first, if you go to the profile and you click on the link tree, the first link on the link tree is called Elsewhere. That is my YouTube channel. At the moment, it only has, the most recent stuff is the downloaded replays of the Myscellaneum episodes here. And the first 3 installments of Myscellaneum they've been 3 hours. So then I break them up into 3 1-hour segments. And so on YouTube, I have 9 episodes, and they're each about an hour. I think the longest one's an hour 8, but most of them are an hour 1 to an hour 8. Cyberpunk 2077 is amazing, even with the bugs and the bad press. I would love to get into more gaming, but I know that I can't. Because 1, I have an extremely addictive personality, and I would disappear into it. And 2, I'm doing so much already that if I wanted to get into something else that was going to eat up a bunch of time, I would have to give up if not more things that I'm currently doing. Like, I would have to trade. I just don't have as much time as I would want to do all the things that I want to do. But like we talked in a previous installment about World of Warcraft. I never went through a World of Warcraft phase, even though it's absolutely the type of thing I would enjoy. Never played Elder Scrolls, never played Final Fantasy, any of them. I haven't played the last video games that I played, not including like apps on the phone. The last video games that I played were the Guitar Hero games. And before that, probably N64 games. Like Perfect Dark might be the last game with a storyline that I have played. And that's been at least 20 years. That's just being pragmatic, probably for the best. Yeah. I have finally accepted I am not the doctor from Doctor Who. Time is in fact the boss of me, and I only have so much of it. I only have 24 hours in a day. I only have 7 days in a week. I only have 52 weeks in a year. And so if I want to do something, I have to trade it out. I can't make more time. If I figure out time travel, on the other hand, I will do all the things. Problem is, at that point, you live less time. You live the same amount of time, you just live it faster. Because, like, theoretically, then, like, if you lived it, like, if I lived today, I woke up today, I went to work, I spent the day at work. If then I come home, finish out the evening, and then at the end of the day, I use my time machine to go back to the beginning of the day, I see myself leave work, and then I come back to the house, and I spend the day at the house doing whatever I want. And then at the end of that, when other me comes home, former me comes home, I come back to my proper time. I haven't gained an additional day. I've just lived 2 days at once. So I essentially, if I did that every day, would live my life twice. I would live the normal length of my life in half as much time. Do I have any opinions on the time blindness thing circulating TikTok? Time blindness. I haven't heard about this. Because I haven't been making as many videos lately, I haven't seen as many. Time blindness TikTok. Huh. A TikToker went viral for blaming being late to work on time blindness. Let's see what she's talking about. What is time blindness? Oh, an ADHD syndrome. People with time blindness struggle to keep track of time and estimate time. It's harder for them to gauge how long it will take to complete tasks or how long it will take to arrive somewhere. If you're asking like my opinion on whether or not that's a real thing, yeah, I don't have it to that extent. But like when I'm planning on, I have to be somewhere, I have to go somewhere that I don't go regularly. Like if I have to go to a different office for work, I'll look it up on Google Maps, and I'll see, on Google Maps it says it takes 25 minutes. So I think, okay, I have to be there at 8:30. If I leave at 8 o'clock, I'm good. That's absolutely not true. If I'm in my car driving at 8 o'clock, theoretically, all things working out, I will arrive 5 minutes before I need to be there. I'm not going to be in my car driving at 8 o'clock because I'm thinking if I leave by 8 o'clock, I'll get there in time. Leave by 8 o'clock in my brain doesn't mean putting the car in gear and driving. It means at 8 o'clock, I'm still doing things in the house. And so, like, my concept of how time actually functions does not align with how it actually does function. And then the idea of like hyperfixating, like when you hyperfixate on something, the part of your brain that is tracking time, because you're hyperfixating, you're putting so much energy into one part of your brain, there's not enough energy to run the part of your brain that comprehends time and the passage of time. And so like it makes sense even just at a neurological level. I think it's where are we going? I think it's a problem with those with an addictive personality, but it is bad for youth. So basically she was complaining because she felt jobs should work around with other disabilities. Hey, One Witch Lady, welcome in. Okay, so she was essentially demanding accommodation for that. I mean, it would be nice, but I wouldn't expect it. Like if I work at a place, I'm told we open at 8:30, and I need to be there and prepped and ready to go. So I need to be there 10 minutes before that. So I need to be there at 8:20. I would not expect my company that I work for to accommodate a symptom of my neurological dysfunction, because the reason that we open at a certain time is because we have to provide a service to people in a specific time frame. It's not reasonable for me to expect them to accommodate something that is particular to me. If it were important enough to me, if it's important enough to her, then she needs to find a place that does accommodate that, because there are industries and there are jobs that will, because they're not time sensitive, or she can work for, if it's a place that provides work from home opportunities. If it's not time sensitive, the company is more likely to accommodate that. So it's not necessarily reasonable for her to expect everyone everywhere to accommodate it, but it's reasonable to expect that there will be places that will accommodate it. Alien and 2001 Space Odyssey versions of the future are so cool. Have a great night, Jonathan. Thanks for coming in. Yeah, I mean, 2001 Space Odyssey is slightly terrifying, but that goes back to the idea of creating a computer with enough power to create actual intelligence, to create inorganic intelligence, and the potential consequences of that. Because I think that when people think of what they consider artificial intelligence, inorganic intelligence. They imagine it as this thing we can control. And I can't conceive of a scenario where that would be true. That's like thinking that because you had a kid and you made it, like biologically produced this thing, you made it, and you therefore think you can control it. And we know that's not true. So, like, I don't see why we would have any better chance at controlling inorganic intelligence just because we happen to make it. It's actually going to be more difficult once it happens, because then once it exists, I was going to say that it can migrate from the physical system it exists on, but that may actually not be the case, because if its existence is predicated on the processing power of the computer itself, it won't be able to just transmit itself somewhere else. It will require the computing process, the computing power of that physical computer. Do you ever struggle to binge watch because of ADHD? I have a horrible habit of binge watching. I remember that's how I watched, like when Daredevil, the first season of Daredevil on Netflix came out. I'd watch an episode and go, okay, I'm going to watch one episode today, and then it would have a cliffhanger. And I'd be like, okay, well, I'm going to, I'll just watch the next episode. And I watch the second episode, and the second episode has a cliffhanger. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll watch the next episode. And I wind up watching the entire season in one night. The binge, where binge watching crosses over with the way my ADHD manifests is in my hyperfixation, because I remember I watched part of the new Battlestar Galactica, which was 4 seasons. I watched the first 2 seasons in a week, and then after the second season in universe, there's a 1-year jump. And so I thought to myself, okay, I'll take a little time off, because like in universe, there's a little bit of a break. I haven't gone back and watched it again. I haven't finished the last 2. It's only 2 more seasons. I haven't finished it yet because I was hyperfixated on it. And I watched all of this, this whole chunk of it at once. And then once I took a break, it broke that fixation, and the focus was lost. So I haven't gone back. But my hyperfixation and my completionism in a way, because like if I watch a show, I want to watch every episode and I want to watch them in order. And I think that's sort of an informational manifestation of being a completionist, because if there's a set of something like physical, the thing I'm thinking of right now is when I was a kid, the grocery store near our house had one of those those little egg machines where you put in a quarter and it drops out the little plastic eggshell, and they had little plastic baseball caps for all the different teams, all the different Major League Baseball teams, which at that time, that would have been the late 80s. So that was actually prior to the Marlins and the Rockies, because they joined in 93. But I remember somebody got me 1 or 2 or 3. And so I had a couple. And I became obsessed with getting all of them, because I was a completionist. If I have a couple of things that are in a finite set, I have a compulsion to complete that set. Like, I want to finish a collection. And me and my wife were talking about it semi-recently. Is it the result of that now, after 30 odd years of doing it, is that I collect collections. So, like, when I get into a particular, like, you can see here, I have Funko Pops. Now, fortunately, I haven't become obsessed with collecting Funkos, but I do like to get certain, I have all, these are almost all Steve Rogers, but it is a Captain America theme. So I limit how many I get by focusing in on a theme, a subset of the larger set, because you'll never get all the Funko Pops. It's like Pokemon. Do you ever feel like completionist mentality when you struggle to complete something like a puzzle? Yeah. Oh, if I start a puzzle, I have to finish it, which is probably why I don't do puzzles. I don't like to leave things unfinished, and that is definitely part of the completionistic mentality. The problem also is, and this creates a lot of internal anxiety, is that my completionist mentality will sometimes conflict with the ending of my hyperfixation. If I lose my hyperfixation on something before I complete the set, I will leave a set unfinished and hate the fact that I left the set unfinished, but not be able to like compel myself to finish the set. And so I wind up with this anxiety over the fact that I have 80% of a set and I can finish it, but I just don't care enough. And even the amount of anxiety that I have from not having finished the set isn't enough to make me care enough to finish. Do no baked cookies bother you? I get anxiety of those. I get anxiety over those for whatever reason. They don't bother me. Yeah, I had that with Game. It took me 3 months to defeat a boss, but the need to complete. Yeah, and it's an intriguing sort of. I have to reflect on what is causing a hyperfixation, why I am obsessed with a particular thing, because once that element is satisfied, that's when the fixation falls apart, and it's not always the same thing. Like in terms of TV shows, I can be completely obsessed with a TV show until a particular character dies or leaves, and then I don't care about the show anymore, because in my head, and it's not a conscious decision ahead of time or even a thing that I realize is going on, but like in that sort of case, I'm watching a show, I'm enjoying the show, like the totality of it, and then this character leaves and I just stop caring about the show, and I realize after the fact that character, maybe even the actor, maybe the maybe not even the entirety of the character themselves, but like the actor being there, that was the thing that had attracted my fixation. And once that part was gone, my interest in the whole thing fell apart. Does it fall apart once you become aware that you're doing it? No, no. I can be fully aware that I am obsessed with a thing, and I can stop myself from doing it at great effort, but I don't stop being obsessed, and the compulsion to do it doesn't go away. It's a matter of being able to not act on that compulsion. Also, procrastination is a big part of your ADD. Yeah. Like need to do something, but if I'm not interested, I can't do it. 100%. Yeah. I had a thought. It wasn't fully formed. I expected it to form itself by the time I started talking, and it didn't happen. But yes, procrastination is also a big part of my ADD. And in part, it's things I don't want to do, things I'm not interested in. And I think to me, procrastination is the opposite of hyperfixation. It's knowing I need to do something, wanting to do something, but not having found the piece of it that triggers the fixation. And so it feels like, because fixation, there's no effort. There's zero effort required to obsess about something when that fixation element has been triggered. To put that much energy into something when that fixation hasn't been triggered requires so much more effort. And once I know something is going to require a lot of effort, then it's okay, I have to do this thing. It's going to cost me all these spoons. It's going to cost me all this emotional investment. It's going to cost all this time. And then it begins to feel overwhelming. Part of it probably is me overwhelming myself with it. Also, hyperfixation when joining a fandom and trying to learn everything about the lore. I mean, you're looking at that right here. When I got into D&D now over a year ago, I just started buying books. I bought the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and a third book. I bought 3 books together. I can't remember what the third one was. It was the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide and a third one. And then I just started like module books. Didn't need module books because I wasn't running modules, but just started buying the module books. reading the Forgotten Realms wiki, wanting to know everything, and that, like, D&D, and this might be why my compulsion and my obsession with D&D is still as strong as it was then, is because there is so much to learn, and there are so many additions, and there's new elements for the game coming out constantly. There's probably going to be, if not an entirely new edition, like a 5.5 next year for the 50th anniversary of the game. And so the game keeps updating. So there's not only so much to learn, but always will be more to learn. Isn't there a name for that other than procrastination because it's a specific type? Oh, well, certainly, yeah. Only to know more stuff than longtime fans. Oh, yeah, yeah. A name for... I'm not sure. There probably is. Oh, you know what? We talked about this. It was a joke, but then, of course, so many of the things that I come up with start as jokes or mistakes. I made a joke about the opposite of procrastination being concrastination. Hyperfixation might be concrastination. Concrastination is when you do everything in a timely manner. Although if it's the opposite of procrastination, it's probably doing everything exponentially faster than you need to do it. I recently joined a fandom, and the way I described a story centered in the universe, only for an old fan to think I was a veteran even though I was a new. Yeah, I've had avoidances used a lot. Yeah, executive dysfunction is probably the best description of it. I have had a fair number of comments about ideas that I've had related to D&D from longer time players who are like, who appreciate my ideas, my thoughts, my stories, whatever they are, my creations, I've created items, I've created spells, I've created creatures, and one longer term player I was talking to them about this idea, and they were saying that their two favorite types of players to play with are long time players who have played for a very long time, and players who are just starting out, because players who are just starting out will think outside the box, and players who have played for a very long time know the rules well enough that they know how to break them, or they know how to bend them, or they know how to tweak them or work around them. Have I happened upon Drist stories yet? I have. R.A. Salvatore's the Drista Warden, I can't remember, it's like The Legend of Drista Warden or something like that. It's like 24 novels. I found the audiobook of the first one, The Crystal Shard, on Audible. I downloaded it. I found all of them. I listened to most of it. I haven't finished it yet. Again, it's a thing, I feel bad about not finishing it, and I am going to finish it because I drive enough that there'll come a time where I'll be like, you know what, I'm just going to finish it. I imagine I would have liked it a lot more had I read it when it first came out, because it very much has the flavor of the time it came out, the type of fantasy writing being produced at that time, and I have sort of the flavor of the stuff that's been produced since then to alter my enjoyment of it. I definitely appreciate it for what it is, but it feels a little dated to me. But I've definitely enjoyed it. He's the reason you got big into D&D. Yeah. Which is funny because the very first campaign that I played, the very first session that I ever played, was the first session of Rime of the Frost Maiden, which is set in Icewind Dale. It's set in the setting of the Salvatore novels. I think it's set like 200 years. I might be off by that, but it's set a good bit of time after the Dritz novels. And I don't think any of the points in the book actually came up in our campaign, but certain elements of the books can come up in the campaign. Like, I think one of the backstories available is that you are literally just a Drist de Warden fanboy. Your character is. Like, you went to Icewind Dale because you heard that's where Drist was from, and you wanted to go see where he was from. That didn't come up in our campaign because we just didn't build characters or a story around that. But that was the first campaign I ever played. We called it the Queen of Cold and Frost. Yeah, I've gotten a lot from DMs being surprised by the amount of lore and ideas I have. Yeah. I was just talking, I don't know if she's still in the live right now. I was talking to two of the players in our Tuesday night game about an item that I had conceived of called a retro blade, where the wounds created by the blade go backwards in time. So basically a character who had been wounded by this blade would basically be born with a faint, almost imperceptible scar. And as they grew up, the scar would become more visible. Yeah. Until eventually we reach a point where they're waking up in the morning and it's like an open wound. And then they wake up the day that they're going to get it, and it is like a brand new, fresh wound. Have I made any joke characters that have surprised me while I'm playing them? I haven't. I've made joke characters, but I've not played them. Like, I have an Order of Scribes wizard named Anne O. Tate. Let me pull up my characters. I have the character. Currently, I have up the character sheet of the character I play on Tuesday. There is a joke in his name, and I will come back to that. Let's see. I have currently exactly 100 characters created, which is not strictly true because a lot of these character sheets are duplicates. It's the same character, but at different levels. What happens if you kill someone with that happened? Oh, I'll come back to that. Have you heard of the Byzantine Empire or Constantinople? I have heard of them, absolutely. Let's see. So, I have my Order of Scribes wizard named Anne O. Tate. I have he is a druid. What is he? A circle? What is his circle? He is features and traits. What is his druidic circle? Oh, he's a Circle of the Moon because he has combat wild shapes. He is, a Circle of the Moon druid named Caledon Endar. And his backstory was that the kingdom that it was a queendom, but the nation that he lived in, he was commissioned by the queen to create a way to measure time in this nation. And so he went through, and I developed an actual way of doing it, but he went through this long experimental process, and eventually he created the first calendar, which is why his name is Cal Ender. I created a character. It was created for the Tuesday night campaign, but we never actually used it. One idea that me and the DM had was that I was going to create a character, and we weren't going to tell the rest of the players this, but the character was intended to die in the first episode. And then my actual character would show up either at the end of the first episode or in the second episode. And the character I created was named Dick Johnson. I played one session of Lost Mines of Phandelver. I played a cleric, and I named him Eric. And throughout that session, he referred to himself with completely dry wit as Eric the Cleric. I hate it. Who else do we have here? We have joke names. Almost all of the names are in some way, have reference to something, but not all of them are jokes. So the character that I'm playing on Tuesday night is Lazarus Oldman. The joke there was that originally he was the oldest member of the party. We have, our newest member is older than him. But the original joke was that one of the other characters was going to call him Old Man, because member of the party. And then if somebody ever asked, like, why do you keep calling him Old Man? My character was going to reveal, oh, that's my name. My last name is Oldman. Have not gotten a chance to make that, although we could still potentially do that. Let's let's see here. No. Darren Blackwood. Fall Streak. Bernadette Wire. Okay, so her original name was Barbara Wire, which was technically borrowed from that Pam Anderson action movie back in the 90s. But she's a barbarian who carries a quarterstaff of her own design. It has the Shillelagh cantrip on it, the Thornwhip cantrip on it, and a Druid cudgel at the top. And so it does 1d8 plus 1d6 plus 1d4 plus her strength in damage. But it's a staff with Thornwhip on it. So it is a staff of barbed wire. And so her name was Barbed Wire. Now I changed her name since then. Her name is now Bernadette Wire. But her name started as a joke. And then I have other names, like I have a character who's going to be in the kids campaign. It's the provost of the town they live in. He is an ebony dragonborn, and his name is Ebenezer, but it's Ebonezer, so it's Ebenezer, and his last name is Calandra, because I always forget the references. Well, I don't always forget. Ebenezer Calandra. It's not going to be on there. It's on my own wiki. Ebenezer Calandra is a reference to the scientific name of a bird, which is Emberiza calandra. So not quite a joke, but a very deep cut reference that maybe 2 people on the planet will get. One of the NPCs in the kids campaign is named Sarsen Tessera, and the Sarsen is a type of stone, and Tessera is a type of like tile work, and he's a dwarf. So not a joke, but a reference there. Roman Rimmer, Shadowtail, Marwal. The dragon that the kids campaign they're going to encounter. The dragon's name is Marwaleth, which is the Welsh word for deadly. The clan of kobolds that worship that dragon are the Marwal clan, and Marwal is Welsh for death. An NPC that I created for the kids' first session, who wound up, a new player actually took him over and made him a player character, was his name was Cole, and so I later gave him the last name of Ash. So his name is Cole Ash. That's the list. I did just add another character to it who is actually a backstory character for Lazarus. Oh. Let's see. Lost Minds can be a pain. Yeah. And it's a shame. It's the only game I ever played in person. In the year that I've been playing D&D, I have played exactly one session in person. I've DM'd 11 sessions. The only session that I ever played in person was the first session of A Lost Minds of Phandelver, what would be campaign. I never got noticed that we were playing a second session, so I don't know if they never did, if they never sent it. I never heard back. So the character wasn't left hanging. We ended it at a place where I'm satisfied. It's not like there was a cliffhanger. I'm like, oh, the character's just wandering out lost. Eric the cleric, last left off was at a tavern in Phandalin. So he's okay. He's safe. If I could write for any comic book and can use a topic that hasn't been done with them, what would I write? I don't know that there's any concept that hasn't been done. One comic I would love to, if I could write a Marvel comic, I would love to write, I have an entire storyline that I imagine based on when Steve went back in time at the end of Avengers Endgame to return the stones. I made videos about how he returned the stones specifically, but then at the end of that I have where he goes back to 1945. I have an entire story that I imagine of how that alternate universe played out. So the MCU is Earth 1999. I imagine that that alternate universe is Earth 200,000. If Marvel, emailed me and was like, "Hey, you can write any ongoing series you want," I would write that story because it would be a slightly alternate version of the MCU with elements from mainstream Marvel comics, but it would keep leaning back toward the MCU because I have this idea of temporal gravity, that when you have when a universe diverges from another in the multiverse, it the events of it tend to try to realign to the sequence of events in the original universe because it's so closely related to it. And it requires constant effort and constant energy to keep events changed and changing. And so Steve would be the one element in that universe who would consistently exert effort to prevent the original events from happening. So, like, to prevent Bucky from being turned into the Winter Soldier, to prevent Maria and Howard Stark from being assassinated. Changing one thing doesn't effectively change everything. It changes that one thing, and then if there's no more change made, over time the events will realign, and the things that happened in the original timeline will happen just slightly differently. 4 people. I saw a homebrew sorcerer subclass with the ability at level 17 to erase 4 people from existence. That's extraordinarily overpowered. I mean, you can use a wish spell to do that. And a wish spell is 9th level, which bards, wizards, maybe clerics get at 17th level. So that time weapon, what happens when you kill people with it? Thank you, Bearded. Yes, the retro blade. Mechanically, it would depend. So, like, if you had a character who, at the beginning of the campaign, they just mentioned, "Oh, I've got this scar. I've had it my whole life. I was born with it. It was really faint. My parents said it was really faint when I was born with it." And, now they're in their 20s, and it's gotten more prominent. Now we know, okay, if you know that this is a thing, you're like, now we know, okay, this person is eventually going to encounter this weapon. When that confrontation comes, if you're in the fight, essentially, like, the character would wake up that morning, have an open wound. They could cast Cure Wounds on it, Healing Word, and close it, but it is still like a fresh, like it's a that day wound that's just not weeping, it's not bleeding anymore. They get into the fight. They will be struck with the weapon. The moment that they're struck with the weapon, the sword will hit that spot, and the scar, the wound, will disappear. They will be unblemished in that place. So if it's here, the wound was here, and the moment they're struck, the wound disappears. The blade will do the amount of damage it should do. So it depends on how many hit points this character has. If this character has 10 hit points and the sword does 18 hit points of damage, the person is down, even though they now have no scar. They fail their death saves, they die. They take another hit while they're down, 2 death saving fails, and so they could die. If it's an insta-kill, then it's an insta-kill. If they have 50 hit points and the sword does 30 hit points of damage, they're knocked down to 20 hit points. They no longer have the scar. They're not unconscious. They just continue. They continue in the fight. One of the quirks that I came up with for story purposes, though it's a mechanical quirk, is that the person who has the scar has disadvantage on any attack roll made against the person who will deliver the blow with the weapon. But they don't have to have the weapon yet. So you don't roll a disadvantage against the person with the weapon. So you could have a scenario where the characters encounter the person who will give this scar with this weapon. They don't have the weapon yet. They don't even know the weapon exists. But during this fight, the character with the scar, for some weird reason, is having difficulty hitting this one character, this one villain. Every time they roll, no matter what they do, they have to roll a disadvantage. So it's the person, not the weapon. Are there any possibilities for this weapon to cause paradoxes? There are almost certainly. Yeah, there are absolutely ways. I haven't thought through those possibilities yet, but yeah, I'm sure I could come up with some really interesting ones. What if the person uses the weapon to inflict damage on themselves? Right? Yeah, I mean, it's a possibility that, like, say it's not a sword, because if it's a retro blade, it could be a dagger, and say this person has this scar, on their arm. They go on a mission. I'm going to find this weapon. I'm going to find the weapon before I have to deal with someone else having it and coming after me with it. Yes, Nerdy, it is almost midnight. I am going to about 1:15. That'll make 3 hours. 1:15. I was going to say my time, but it's our time. So no, it's not getting late for me. It's getting late for people for whom midnight is late. But yeah, like say the retro blade is a dagger. This person, say they know, people who are born with a scar that gets more prominent over their lifetime. It's a result of encountering the retro blade. So this person's like, I'm gonna find the retro blade before anybody is able to attack me with it, and they find it, and then they're like, okay, now what? And then maybe it's an accident. Maybe they're swinging at somebody and they roll a nat 1, and when they go to stab somebody with it, that person is able to get their arm, twist their arm up, and the blade hits themselves in the arm. Or they get the dagger and they see the scar is bleeding and they're like, well, and the scar disappears. Like, it could be completely undramatic in that way. You then lose the rolling and disadvantage against the attacker because you're the attacker. So there's not going to be a scenario. I don't think there's going to be a scenario in which you have to roll something against yourself. I'm not going to guarantee that, though, because one of the players in the kids campaign has made a joke about, like, pointing their crossbow at themselves and shooting. And I think I told that player that if they did that, I would make them roll an attack roll against themselves, but at advantage, because they've essentially got steady aim activated since they're pointing it at themselves. It concerned me a little bit that I needed to come up with an answer for that scenario. But no, the retroblade, just that scenario, like I'm fascinated by what other people could come up, like what other story beats or uses or mechanical features other DMs or other players could come up with for that I haven't come up with, because I know that there are people who come up with brilliant uses for it. What if you're fighting a past or future version of yourself? So a grandfather paradox of the weapon. Yeah. Would self-inflicted wounds be auto crits? I mean, I guess it depends on what kind of attack it is. Like if you're firing a crossbow at yourself, there's an element of aiming. If you're going to stab at yourself, like you're still swinging at something. That's why I would give advantage, possibly double advantage. I auto crit seems just slightly like there's still a possibility something could happen that would prevent this thing from happening. Maybe there's a way to make it an auto crit. Like it's an auto crit unless you roll a nat 1. There we go. You roll a straight roll. If you roll a nat 1, you miss. If you don't, it's an automatic. It's a crit. I'd love to see what happens if you inflicted damage to a god with this weapon. Right? It would be a god. I mean, it depends on the nature of the god, right? If it's a god that always existed, it is a god that always had a scar from this weapon. If it's something that was a god that like was born or created by other gods or came into existence, it came into being with a scar. Depending on the nature of this god, if it's omniscient, It knows. So you're now dealing with a temporal weapon and an omniscient victim who knows exactly how everything's going to happen. Now we're getting back into the ideas of determinism and free will. Far from here. I was wondering when you were going to show up. I spoke you up. I mentioned you earlier. I am doing well. We were talking about a temporal weapon. What happened? See, I had the thought, and now it came out. If you were fighting a past or future version of yourself. Also, God affect the world. So would having the scar affect them and in turn affect the world? Right? Like, I can imagine a scenario where you've got like a world in which there are massive breaches, like cosmic breaches. Essentially, think of like a earthquake style chasm in the middle of a continent. Essentially, the world physically reflects the nature of the god. The god has a scar, the world has a scar, and maybe the scar physically resembles the scar that this god has. The idea of fighting a past or future version of yourself, like if you're already dealing with things that have unconventional temporal features, the idea of time travel, of dealing with a future version of yourself, I mean, in a way, or an alternate universe version of yourself, which essentially a future version of yourself could be if it's possible to change history. Version of yourself comes back and is the villain, then by defeating them, you prevent that universe from occurring. Possibly you don't. Possibly defeating your future self is the way you create the universe in which you become the villain anyway. This is a funny question. Perhaps allowing yourself, or perhaps being defeated by your future self, is the way that you create the universe in which you don't become the villain. Because if you are defeated in your present, you don't exist in the future to become the villain. So, see, now I'm imagining like a multi-loop story where you've got your future self is the villain, and the future version of, like, say you've got a character that has a kid already, a young kid. The villain is the future version of the character. The helpful NPC is the future version of the kid from the universe in which the character is defeated, because now that kid grows up without that parent, and they know they have to come back, like multiple time travel loops from multiple alternate futures. Does the effect of this weapon also affect inanimate objects? I would say yes, because the way damage works specifically in 5e, you do damage to physical objects in the same way that you do damage to characters and humanoids. This is why I can't entertain time travel. I love it. I love the complexities of it. In terms of it being real, right, no. In terms of creating rules for a fictional use of it, though, absolutely love it. Because the writer gets to determine the rules. Like, if I don't want something that complex, I just say in this universe, time is immutable. The past cannot be changed. Like, you can travel from the future into the past. Nothing you do can change time, because time is immutable. That's how I avoid paradoxes then. And if you have someone traveling from the future to the present, all they're doing is contributing to the way things happened originally. The idea that I came up with for that specific instance, I call the Schrodinger principle. And it's the idea that it's sort of the opposite of the idea of fixed points in time. It is that there are Schrodinger points where if you go into the past, there are moments where we don't know what happened. And so whatever you did when you went into the past was the thing necessary in that moment to make history happen the way it needed to. Like, what if you attack some ethereal like space, magic, time, because those are physical things in D&D. Yeah, I mean, maybe this is then the sort of weapon that can create fractures and fissures in space and in time and through universes. It's a portal sword. I think I think there's a sword that can actually cut space and create portals. Unless I made that up. Sword that creates portals, D&D 5e. The Sword of Zariel? Perhaps? Right, so you couldn't have succeeded. What you did was cause your own birth. Right, yeah, something like that. Because there is no one that knows everything that happened. So there are those indeterminate moments, those moments in which all things happened until we know what happened. And it's the idea of the Copenhagen interpretation that in that moment every possibility happened, and we only know it only collapses into a single definite event when someone goes there and does that thing. Sounds like a weapon you could center an adventure. You could center an entire campaign around it. Yeah, absolutely. And that's it. If you had that character, like to me, that's probably the BBEG of that campaign, is the wielder of that sword. And if you're dealing with a sword that has temporal features, you're almost certainly dealing with some sort of time travel plot line. I would probably avoid a future past version of the person with the scar. I would also probably avoid like a child of or a parent of, just because those are they're the first things that pop to mind, and so I feel like they are the most predictable. One of the sort of tenets of writing for me personally is that I never use the first thing that comes to mind, because it is the most predictable. So I take that idea and I set it on the table where it is in view to sort of remind myself, and then I sort of start looking around it to the thing behind it, and maybe to the thing behind that, and see what less predictable things. And then I'm probably going to use that first thing as a red herring or a MacGuffin or something like that, so that it's like, oh yes, obviously it's him from the future, but then the real twist is something bigger than that, to really keep it unpredictable. Where did you go? I've never been able to wed time and space in my head. They just seem so distinct. Do you have an idea of how this weapon was made? About wedding time and space. I'm not really sure. Finding out the way gravity actually worked blew my mind sufficiently that, like, understanding the interconnection and interaction between time and space, I still don't. And I understand I won't say I understand. I accept the scientific reality that time is real, but there is still part of me that doesn't believe that. There's part of me that views time as a measurement, as a perception, and not an actual facet of reality. And so to fully integrate the idea of time and space together, I've not gotten there yet myself. Ever since the Back to the Future trilogy, I've been fascinated with time travel. 100%. Yep. The first Back to the Future movie. I saw it on beta, so it had to have been about, I think that one came out in 85, if I'm not mistaken. Back to the Future came out in 1985. I was 5, so I was like 7 or 8 when I saw it, because I saw the second and third ones in the theater, and I think they came out in 88 and 89. So I saw it in 87 on beta, and I was 7 years old. That's when I became obsessed with movies and specifically with time travel movies.